I have always made the assumption that at least one person in the congregation will know more than I do about nearly anything I reference in a sermon. You are a smart lot, and it can be intimidating. So I often approach these hoping to prompt you to ask better questions and perhaps think about things in a way you might not have occurred to you. This is one of those sermons. I've never been mistaken for Sheldon Cooper, PhD, SCD, the senior theoretical physicist at Caltech, despite our same last name and ties to the state of Texas. He was born in Galveston and grew up in East Texas. He was a child prodigy and has a genius level IQ of 187. Now, while my IQ is but a fraction of that, I do have the advantage of not being a fictional character. Sheldon is, of course, the main protagonist of the television show The Big Bang Theory and its spin-off, the prequel series, Young Sheldon, which is just my way of bringing up the Big Bang. As our Future Visions, Future Selves topic this month is death, aka the end, I thought we should start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. In 1922, physicist Alexander Friedman originated the scientific notion of an expanding universe. In 1929, Edwin Hubble discerned that galaxies are moving away from Earth at a rate that accelerates proportionally with distance. And in 1931, physicist Georges Lemaitre proposed that the universe emerged from a primeval atom and thereby introduced the modern notion of the Big Bang. Those of you listening carefully will have noted that this is only about 100 years ago. Unitarian Universalists, at our best, in my opinion, are keen to meld the scientific with the religious, the verifiable with the inexplicable. In his A Tough Mind and a Tender Heart sermon, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated, "Science investigates, religion interprets. Science gives man knowledge, which is power. Religion gives man wisdom, which is control. Science deals mainly with facts. Religion deals mainly with values. The two are not rivals." So approximately 13.8 billion years ago, the universe expanded faster than the speed of light for a fraction of a second, a period called cosmic inflation. When cosmic inflation stopped, the energy driving it transferred to matter and light. The Big Bang. Matter, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. Light, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. I believe there may be a closer connection to the scientific and the theological than we're anxious to admit. By pairing those two readings earlier this morning, I was suggesting that, for all we know, dark energy may be what many think of as God. The most conspicuous shared attribute is the fact that we don't really know what they are. 70% of the universe is dark energy, and many faith traditions believe God is omnipresent, present everywhere at all times. The unknown force causing the universe to expand may also be the force pulling it toward love and peace and connection, like the scent of pancakes in the morning. Similar to what I just described, within Shinto, the indigenous religion of Japan, natural events are considered to be manifestations of heavenly energy. The Hindu faith accepts God as both a grounding absolute reality and the exponent of innumerable changing processes. They believe there is something eternal and inherently divine within the human heart, and that something is not different from that which is eternal and inherently divine and permeates all creation. Buddha taught that Hindu gods do exist, but do not hold dominion over daily human life. Instead, they are subject to the same universal laws that human beings must observe. Since time began, and in all cultures and times, people have tried to articulate those things we have trouble understanding. People have turned to myth, not as in untruth, but as in a traditional story that may be essentially true while not necessarily historically accurate, to explain the world around us. We have also turned to metaphor, a phrase suggesting a resemblance to something not literally like it. In the Christian tradition, God has been described as a king, a shepherd, a rock, and many other things. But these metaphors, I don't think, really seem to work anymore. Shepherd isn't offered as a viable option at most schools' career day. Being a king is mostly confined to England and, well, the mind of one misguided office holder. And the rock is a wrestler and voice in Moana movies. In his book, Judaism, Physics, and God, Searching for Sacred Metaphors in a Post-Einstein World, Rabbi David W. Nelson looks for new metaphors to help express religious belief and thought. He explores some of the great theories of modern physics, like the Big Bang, quantum mechanics, and string theory, to try to find new metaphors to help express religious belief and thought. My favorite new metaphor that he proposes is that of the fractal, a term coined in 1975 to describe a particular kind of real-world shape. This is mathematician John Costi's description. Fractals are curves that are irregular all over. Moreover, they have exactly the same degree of irregularity at all scales of measurement. So it doesn't matter whether you look at a fractal from far away or close up with a microscope. In either case, you'll see exactly the same picture. So if you hold a large fractal object in your hand and break off a tiny piece, and look at it under magnification, it will be exactly like the original object. You can keep breaking off smaller and smaller pieces until there's nothing visible left, and each piece will still be exactly like the original. Did you ever make a diorama in school? Now, I remember using twigs to simulate full-grown trees. When you look through the little hole in the end of the shoebox, with a little imagination, you could see what appeared to be a full-sized landscape. These twigs could be thought of as a type of fractal. The twig looks just like the branch looks just like the limb looks like the entire tree. Other real-life examples are the branching of river systems, tiny streams feeding larger streams, feeding rivers, the branching structure of the bronchi in the lungs, the contours of the clouds, the distribution of noise in an electronic signal, and the surfaces of proteins like hemoglobin. All these phenomena, and many others, exhibit the remarkable fractal characteristic of self-similarity. The list suggests that there is something essentially fractal about the shape of the universe in a literal as well as a metaphorical sense. Now, here's where it gets both interesting and relevant, at least to me. Rabbi Nelson asks, might it be useful to think of God's shape as fractal? I quote from his book, "If we assume that there are basic structural similarities between the universe and the creative processes that designed it, then it makes sense to think of the fractal nature of the universe, visible at scales from the submicroscopic to the supergalactic, as reflective of the shape of God." What does that mean? Simply that when I contemplate the structure of a tree, the series of branchings off that lead from the trunk to the tiniest twigs, what I am contemplating is in some sense reflective of God. And the fact that the structure is self-similar means that I can contemplate the whole picture of God, the entire divine structure and nature, as it were, in a single flash of lightning or the veins on a single leaf. According to one traditional explanation of the statement in Genesis that God made humans in God's own image, when I interact with a human being, I can see through that individual to the God in whose image he or she is created. As that understanding changes my relationship to other people, leading me to value their uniqueness and their inherent value and worth, so regarding any of the many fractal-shaped phenomena of nature as geometric images of God can change not only my ability to sense God's presence, but my view of the world in which I live. We use these metaphors to imagine what God or aspects of the divine may be like. Humanity has also always created stories and imagery around death and life after death, next month's Future Visions, Future Selves topic. Of course, people don't like to think about, let alone discuss, death, but like taxes and bad traffic in Houston, death is a sure thing. After today's second service, after this service, we're having a workshop in the fireside room to give you information on how to prepare for the inevitable. In every time and culture, people have tried to make sense of and understand the concept of death. Much like many Unitarian Universalists, practitioners of Judaism choose to look beyond the ideas of death, heaven, and hell to focus on the value of human life here and now. This leads to the belief that it's more useful to work on lifting others up than to wonder about our relationship to God after death. I've often mentioned Dr. King's vision of beloved community, a community wherein people from all racial, national, religious, and ethnic backgrounds are respected, and where their human dignity is affirmed. And of course, this takes place on this side of the grave. In comparison, the Quran, the holy book of Islam, focuses eloquently and at length on preparing for the life to come and the temporary nature of life on earth. Because, as much as we don't like to think about it, our life here on earth is temporary. According to Hindu scriptures, at the time of death, the soul of the believer departs the body through a spiritual channel in the body called a chakra. The belief is that one's destination is dependent upon one's state of mind at the moment of passing. This gives those who are aware of their impending death time to prepare, completing as many earthly obligations as possible, and to resolve their disputes, debts, and emotional entanglements before passing. Ideally, the practitioner aims to avoid rebirth and attain permanent union with infinite intelligence. Last year, Conrad and I visited a pre-Columbian architectural site called Los Guacamontones in the state of Jalisco. Those who built the site participated in the shaft tomb tradition. The most influential citizens were interred underground. A shaft was dug, then a room of sorts was carved to lie the deceased and surround them with vessels, figurines, and other mortuary goods. The guide explained that the deeper the shaft, the closer the deceased were to the paradise for the mortals below. The paradise for the gods was above, hence the building of the bullseye-shaped stepped mounds used for ceremonial rituals. We had visited Los Guacamontones so that I could fulfill a promise to preach at the Lake Chapala UU Fellowship in Jalisco, although I was still reeling from my parents having passed in December. I then returned to Houston and preached almost exactly a year ago today. In that sermon, I talked about the beliefs held by my parents and their religious community. They believed in the Christian concept of reward in the afterlife for those who accept redemption through Jesus Christ. My father was devastated when my mother died. His only consolation was that he would be with her soon. At his service, person after person, while expressing regret, noted that he was with her again. The one song he wanted sung at his funeral was "The Far Side Banks of Jordan," because the lyrics promised he'd be waiting for my mom. And I'll be waiting on the far side banks of Jordan. I'll be waiting, drawing pictures in the sand. And when I see you coming, I will rise up with a shout and come running through the shallow waters, reaching for your hand. Rivers seem to be a recurrent theme in the afterlife. In the Iliad, the river Styx forms a boundary of Hades, the abode of the dead. Our choir this morning sang, "If you get there before I do, I'm bound for the land of Canaan. Look out for me, I'm coming too. I'm bound for the land of Canaan." Just as we imagine what may happen once we breathe our last breath, some may wonder what will happen when the universe meets its untimely end. Just as there was a Big Bang, one scenario for the ultimate fate of the universe is called the Big Crunch. This is when the expansion of the universe reverses and the universe recollapses. This could be potentially followed by a reformation of the universe, starting with another Big Bang. While not the most plausible theory, some physicists have proposed that a Big Crunch-style event could result from a dark energy fluctuation. Or as the book of Ecclesiastes in the Hebrew Bible puts it, "Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it." Famously, Carl Sagan told us, "The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself." Perhaps the Big Crunch, the universe recollapsing on itself, is that star stuff returning to the Spirit who made it. Perhaps, as the Hindu scriptures suggest, we will be attaining permanent union with infinite intelligence. Perhaps some of that star stuff experiences that union as arriving at the land of Canaan. And some experience it as seeing their loved ones on the far side banks of Jordan. Perhaps there is a closer connection to the scientific and the theological than we are anxious to admit. It's something to think about. Amen.